need to get closer, or we're good?
No, you sound good on my side. We'll see if everybody else can hear you, but we are live. What's happening, Fish and Friends? Welcome to another episode. Super excited. As always, let me know in the comments. I want to make sure we're working. I don't want to be going for 15 minutes here and have stuff not going correctly, but I'm excited tonight. I have the aquatic biologist with me, and Shan, ever since I watched you on Burley's, if you guys watch, Burley's channel, he had Shan on a while back, and Burley referred to you as Shan the Man O'Gorman. So ever since then, you've always been Shan the Man to me. But Shan is a fishery scientist. I'm excited to have him on. My buddy, actually, Philip Cheek, is in the chat right now. He's the one that kind of hooked it up beforehand. Randizzle's out of town. I was going to have him on. That kind of fell through. So Shan was generous enough to jump on at super short notice. So I appreciate that a ton. So we're going to ask Shan, pick his brain. I don't know where my monster bass box is. I was going to say somewhere here. I'm giving one of those away. That's going to be the giveaway tonight. Chris in the comments won it last time, but I'm going to give one of my boxes away. I'll throw the link in the description here after we're done, but $55 box. They're selling it for $29 over there. 9 lures. It's a pretty sweet deal. Y'all have already heard me talk about it. So I will give one of those away probably here in about an hour, but Shan, I want to pick your brain. So give us the 30-second elevator speech on kind of who you are, what you do, what your background is. Let us know.
Okay. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
The program several times. I enjoy it. It's good. You do a good job.
Yeah, I asked beforehand. I'm like, you probably have no clue who I am, but
no,
want to go
like,
I've heard of you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good. So I got a degree in fisheries science from University of Georgia in the 90s. And while I was there, I was also a lifeguard. That was like a summer job. And I noticed between, like, the lifeguard guy had like homeowners associations at the pools, at the HOAs. And I saw when I took pond management that there were a lot of HOAs that had ponds around Atlanta because I was working at the pools. I would literally drive past the ponds to go to their pools. And, pH, hardness, it's water, it's water management. Managing a pool is the opposite of managing a pond, really, but it's still managing water. So I started getting pond management jobs when I was in college and just kind of left school and started taking care of ponds for a living. And did that for a long, long time. I sold a bulk of that business in 2010. The part that you have to do the dredging and the treating of weeds and the picking up of garbage, got rid of all that.
The fun stuff.
Yeah. Well, stuff that makes money. Because when you work for HOAs, it's strange when you get with a bunch of fishermen, that you wouldn't think that even though I'm a lake manager, a bulk of my work was not fisheries related. And like all of the work that was profitable was not fisheries related. So I think that's probably the reason why you don't have the type of information that I'm putting out, because it's really hard to make money in this business because it's almost too niche, if that makes sense. It's like, sometimes I explain to people, like, if you got a private lake owner, like, just take that. I mean, you own a lake. Okay. Do you own a Lamborghini too?
Right.
Because that's usually how that goes. So how many Lamborghini mechanics do you know?
Yep.
That's kind of what I am. Unless you're dealing with an HOA. But again, HOAs, black line, just absolutely just take fisheries management out of it. They do not pay for it. They don't care. Unless there's dead fish floating around, you're not making any money managing fish in a lake nobody fishes in. Now, you'll make money, treating weeds and picking up garbage and keeping it looking good. You'll make all the money in the world. So that's kind of, I don't want to mislead people into what my job was. My job was a lot of work. This was the kind of the whipped cream on the top. This aquatic biologist page that I'm doing now. This is the fun part of the job. there's another 90% of it that,
it's kind of like YouTube. Going live and watching the videos, the fun part, editing and grinding out and skunking and all the other stuff. That's the crappy tough part.
I think that's too what helps me get ahead as far as like followers and just helping people is I'm doing it, real world experience. Everything I'm doing is trying to kind of real time. I'm not trying to look back too much. I'm trying to look forward. And I don't really try to talk about things that I've done in the past. I'll just do it live, and we'll talk about that moving forward, because talking about things I've done in the past doesn't matter. I can't prove it. I have some pictures and stuff that I use on the page all the time, but I'd rather just kind of walk the walk.
I totally get that.
Over the next 6 or 8 months, it'll really start coming clear to people. Like when we start seeing some results on the stuff that I've got going. Yeah, I mean, I've got a lot of stuff coming along, and it'll be noticeable for people. It'll clear a lot of things up.
That makes sense, and that would be hard to like prove, because you'd have to build like a portfolio, right? Like here's the proof of jobs that I've done or places that I've managed, and these are the fish that you've pulled out, or something like that. And that takes time, like you said. That doesn't happen overnight. I think they said here, like if you have a good fed bass, and you'd be well more capable of speaking this than me, but like 1.5 pounds for the first year or whatever if they're well fed, and then something about like 1 pound thereafter if they're well fed is like a general, like in a public lake. I don't know what that is for like a stocked place, or what, like you look at an average how long it takes a fish to get to 5 pounds or whatever in a public lake.
Well, all right, so that's a good question. So what you're talking about is fish population balance, okay? And I guess the technical, like if you wanted to do like math, it would be called a PR ratio, or a predator to prey, or predator to forage ratio, right? So if you get into a predator to forage ratio of like, 1-to-1, your bass will die. They can't handle that. They've got to eat a lot more than that, right? You've got to have like 20 bait fish to every bass.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So
because how much do bass eat in a day? Do you know, like on average, how much weight they'll eat?
It's kind of like saying how many birds will a cat kill? You know what I mean? Is the food available to the fish? Yes. It's crushing souls. That's all I can say about that. It's not stopping. Okay. It doesn't let up that much. Now I understand like fishermen are going to take that a different way, but what fishermen don't understand is just because the fish aren't biting your hooks doesn't mean the fish aren't feeding. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And I can, like, through my shocking, like doing electrofishing surveys and stuff, I know where the fish are, right? I know they're there. They're there all the time. Like every year I go over the stump row in 6 feet of water in the corner of that pond, and an 8-pound bass comes up every single time, right? The big fish camp out on the places that it's easy to feed. Does that make sense?
Oh, makes a ton of sense. Yeah. And I think that kind of goes into the whole thing of, because the other thing I've heard too is, which kind of contradicts that, fish are like people, they might not feed all the time, but when they're hungry, they're going to eat.
They're going to eat. And
you're kind of saying,
I think the pros too. I mean, I think those guys have an ability that many people don't have. And well, I think reaction strikes are very important. Let's put it that way. All right. Do you know the difference, like a feeding strike and a reaction strike?
Yep. We talked about that.
Okay. So knowing where your fish are at, knowing what your fish are in, like knowing, like, are they on wood or rocks? What's going to deflect best off wood? What's going to deflect best off rock? What's going to deflect and get into their face and, move around and create that that reaction strike? Because on the days that I'm not getting actively feeding, I'm going to that type of fishing. I'm going to make them bite. And that's what a reaction strike is, like a reflex, like the doctor hits your knee, your foot kicks up.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. The thing I always use is like throwing a ball. throw a ball, you're gonna kind of the
catch
same
it.
thing with fish. They see
So
it go by and they just
whip
have an
something
instinct.
down across their face real fast. And I think, like, the one thing I've learned, I guess, a bunch of experience. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
On the slow days, speed up, or at least
Really?
don't forget to go fast sometimes. How about that? You know?
Okay.
Even in the winter, give it a little speed sometimes. You're trying to get that reaction strength. Now, wintertime speed and summertime speed are two different things, but you see where I'm going with that. Don't always stall it out.
I can see so many different side quests going on here. We've got, because one good one that I saw is, how much does lure color come into play? And this is something I've thrown around on my channel a lot, and I will stand on the hill and die to say the best bass anglers, the best pros are the guys who are best at locating bass. Because if you know there's fish there, I think there's 2, 3, 4, 5 different things you could throw at them and get them to bite. And that's something that we talk about. I think there's certain situations where color does really come into play. And I was on Alex Rudd's channel, and he had a fisheries biologist on who was talking about kind of the same thing, that fish will learn in certain spots when they have different types of food to eat, the food that gives them the most energy, kind of the most bang for the buck. And in that situation, they will key in on that. So if it's like, Gizzard Shad or whatever, they have good sized Gizzard Shad that they eat and they're easy to get, they might really key in on that versus if you're throwing a bluegill color, they're harder to eat, the shape, whatever to it. But, let's say I find a spot, that 6-7 foot of timber and you're flipping stuff in there. If it's kind of stained water, maybe you've got 3 foot of visibility. How big of a difference is black and blue versus green pumpkin going to be if you flip it in front of that fish where it should be?
Yeah. See, that's where what you're touching on there is kind of like the tip of the iceberg, I really feel like. And
that's what I mean. I feel like we could go so many places.
you can totally go there. And get so into detail there. But personally for me, I'm not really crazy on the color of the lure. Like if I've got a lure with a black back and a chrome side that's catching fish and I lose it, and the only thing I've got is a blue back with a chrome side, I'm not worried about it. You know what I mean? I'm close enough. If it's the same type of lure, it's deflecting the same way, it's hunting the same way, I'm not that concerned with lure color most of the time. But I can tell you this, man, I am concerned with size of the blade. I am concerned with like this right here. I picked some up today. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
I use those a lot. Why? Because it's just a little bit different.
Okay.
How many people take the time to swap that out?
Yep.
Not many. Not especially where I'm going fishing. These cats ain't swapping out their treble hooks. They're rocking the same thing, like round trap since '82 when they bought it.
I talk about the same thing. That's why I say silent cranks, I think, are highly underrated, because you've got the same old boys throwing the same, bomber or KVD rattling crankbait in a bright color,
Dude, go get you some balsas too, man. Balsas are the balsas. I was in a bass club when I was at Georgia. And so I was going to fisheries school, but on the weekends I'd be fishing with bass tournament, like bass tournaments, but just like bass clubs, just like you win a few $100, big fish get you $100, a couple $100 for the tournament. You split it with your partner or whatever. It was fun. But I learned a lot from those old dudes, man, because I was on the back of the boat. I didn't have a boat. I was a non-boater,
Yep.
And so I had to roll every week. I rolled out with a different fisherman for a different tournament. Well, I got to go with guys that were like 30, 40-year bass veterans, fishing in that club that long, just serious bass fishermen. And I was always a serious bass fisherman. I grew up fishing, But when you got into that level of it, and you saw how those guys were doing it, and they just fished you off the boat, and
and
it's so much, I just keep my mouth shut and watch, you know?
Absorb. I preach that all the time. Knowledge is power, man. It doesn't matter who it is, learn, because you might be 10,000 times better than the dude you're in the boat fishing a jig, but that guy might be able to fish you upside down with a spinnerbait. You know, you can learn from everyone, different techniques. And I had retro bassing on my channel. Was that last weekend before? I don't remember. But he's big into like the older bass lures and stuff. And, you know, I got into my old tackle box, and it's funny how much some of these lures and types and profiles come back around, you know, stuff from, you know, Tequila Sunrise was my dad's jam back in the day. And like, you never like completely died out, kind of the same with spinnerbait, you know, Hank Parker, you know, all those guys were throwing it back then. Then they kind of died out because of the chatterbait. Now you see some of that stuff coming back up. Now, you know, different plastic places have the Tequila Sunrise, and more spinnerbaits are on the market, and it's like a cycle, you know?
Sure. Yeah. I like to see, I'm liking the metal lips on the crankbaits are coming back.
Yep.
Old,
Yeah, that's
I've got a Rapala in there with a metal lip. It was like grandpa's tackle.
yeah, funny enough, these were some of the old lures and I was showing, and it doesn't rattle like some of the ones they have now, but yeah, some of these
man,
metal lip cranks.
And those L-shaped lips hunt good too, man. Those crazy looking lips like that are like an L.
Yeah, we went all down memory lane. Let's get to a few questions, dude. Like I said, we're only 16 minutes in, and I'm already nerding out. This is a ton of fun, man. Again, thanks for joining on short notice, Shan.
Oh, it's no problem, man. Really enjoyed
Let's see. So, and if you see any comments coming through where you see a good question you want to hop in, feel
I'm
free
looking
to.
I think I'm on the wrong thing, man. I'm on the StreamYard or something. Let's see.
Yep. Yeah, it'll be a StreamYard, and you should have the comments over on the right. I think you can click on, and you should be. I don't know if you can see them in that view. I'm not sure how it works.
Oh, there we go. Sorry about that.
Okay. Oh, no worries, dude. Let's see. So yeah, Eric asked the question about lure color. I had somebody ask earlier, I forget who it was, sorry, but asked about how important crawls are. So I guess that'd kind of be a wide open question. It would depend on what you have in your lake or pond that you stock. How important are craws to bass fishing? I guess I don't know the actual question, but
okay. Well, yeah, crawfish are forage, you know. Natural occurring forage that you'll find in water, you know, fresh water everywhere. And
oh, here we go. The actual question was, sorry to interrupt you. What role do craws play in growing big bass? Will they feed more on craws or bait fish if both are available, or are they purely opportunistic and eat whatever they see? Okay, that was way more eloquent than what I was saying.
Okay, yeah. The answer to that is yes.
Yes. Okay.
Bass are opportunistic and eat whatever they see. Yes. They will eat the most available forage there. Okay? They'll eat whatever. And
makes sense.
In your bass heavy lakes where, you know, you need to harvest some and you're full of 10 and 11 and 12-inch fish, what do you think your adult bass are feeding on? Other bass. That's the most prevalent forage for them.
And that's something I think that goes really untalked about, because I'm guilty of it too. I'm thinking shad, bluegill, or, you know, like a craw. Those are the big three.
Yeah,
right?
Hold on. I'm going to go grab something real quick.
Yeah, I'll go through some more questions. Well, I hope y'all are having fun. We have 175 people in here. I appreciate it a ton. Rock on Bassin said 70 likes and 170 people. Yeah, folks, what's going on? Come on, hit that like button. It's free. Unless you don't like me, that's fine. Block me. Unsubscribe.
I picked up this glide bait, Mike Bucas.
Oh yeah, was that Jen's? Did Jen do that one?
No, it's some other guy. I have to go look him up.
Oh, I bet that was that TK?
Oh, I can't remember the guy's name.
Epic Eric's buddy.
It is awesome. I'm going to smoke him on that thing.
Dude, that thing is beautiful. I dabble in some lure painting. Nowhere near that good to go. That's an awesome one.
Yeah, that thing's killer. Mike's got some great baits over there.
Bullshit. Oh, for sure.
Yeah. But I specifically and have for a long time, for many, many years, because I figured that out years ago. When you get, say, like 500, 600, 700 acre lakes that get stunted, you'll really see the break. Like, it'll be really poor bass, like 8, 10, 11 inches mostly, all real skinny. And then there'll be a real healthy group of fish that are up on top of those, that are feeding on those. the craziest story I ever had about a lake like that, I didn't actually get to fish there. When I first got to Georgia, Dr. Gilbert, I was in Dr. Gilbert's office, and he really helped me out a lot. Just he let me TA the fisheries class, run the shocking boat for 3 years, just instrumental in getting me a lot of on the ground experience while I was still in school, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, they had some kind of project going, excuse me, down at the nuclear power facility somewhere in South Georgia, maybe around Augusta or somewhere over there. But there was like a 800-acre lake that was on the facility that nobody was allowed to fish in. So they were using it as a test lake for a lake, because it's really hard to find like a 750, 800-acre lake with no fishing pressure, literally zero. You know, it's almost impossible to find that. So they got permission from the power plant to fish the lake and use it as a big lake with no pressure, and the results. Well, Dr. Gilbert, I didn't get to go fishing there, but I did see the results. I saw a lot of videos and stuff. This is the 90s, so it was 91 actually, or 93 by then. Yeah, 93, but we didn't have all the digital availability to record things, you know. But Dr. Gilbert told me when they started fishing, it was on a clock. Everybody had a station. You fished around, changed lures. It was all very scientific. He made 28 casts. He caught 28 fish in a row. He broke off. He retied on his other lure, and he did it again in there. And then several people had pictures of holding 10-pound fish, one in each hand.
Wow.
And it was literally bass and bass that could eat other bass. That was basically the only thing in the 700 acres of water. It had stunted because it had been left alone, you know, left to go. And I don't know, maybe 20 years it had been left.
Wow.
So it stunted out, and then that's what you ended up with. Now, when you scale that down, when you're not in 750 acres of water anymore, when you get like under 100 acres of water, right? That changes. And the fishing won't be good like that. It won't produce a couple of 10-pounders. Basically, what you just get is the bad half of that. A bunch of stunted bass. There's none of them that climb up. There'll be a couple, and you'll never catch them. Every once in a while, once a decade.
Why is that?
Because there's two
Just
of them.
Numbers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right place, right time type thing when you happen to throw a lure on it.
Well, and again, lure resistance. You know, the fish has been there a long time. It's how many times it's been caught. How many times you think you're going to catch that bass?
That's another question we get a lot. Do fish learn? Do fish know the difference between artificial? Because I hear people talk about that all the time. Fish are stupid animals. They have a brain the size of the pea. They don't know any difference. If you throw the right thing at the right time, they're always going to eat it. Is that true? Do you think? Or do you think they learn?
No. I've seen
artificial?
Studies like I remember. It's probably been. Let's see, how old am I now? It's probably been 15 years ago now. But I read studies from the University of Illinois. I believe is where it was. Double check me on the school, but if Illinois has a fisheries program, and I'm pretty sure they do, I'm pretty sure that's where that study came from. Lure resistance in largemouth bass. They did a study on that and proved it. I've seen it since I've known about it since I was a little kid. I'll just use my personal experience with it. You can go down that little 3-acre pond behind my house when I was a kid. Take any new lure. I don't care what it was. Chatterbait, you know, new micro crankbait, offsize, anything. Go in there and just wear fish out on it till you catch about every fish in the pond. And then you'll start seeing a drop. And then you'll see another drop and another drop to the point where if you keep throwing that lure at them every day, they'll stop hitting it. They just figure it out, right? That's called fishing pressure or lure resistance. and I know I can prove it, right? Because I don't have to use these hypotheticals, right? I have a feeder. I could feed train bluegill, and there's now feed train bass too. If you could train a fish to feed, you could train a fish not to feed.
That's a good question. Yeah, and for feeders, what he's talking about is those big square things you'll see on some of those places that spit out like what pellets or almost looks like dog food kibble type stuff, right? That
Yeah,
they're eating, or like at
you can just keep it in a trash can next to the pond, walk out on the dock, and throw it in by hand.
I was thinking like the theme parks will
Yeah.
have like the koi and stuff, that they know where the feeders are at, and they'll be all down there, or the carp or whatever. They'll all be down there waiting, right? They know what's
Yeah.
going on.
So if I walk out on my dock every day, which I've done before in aquaculture class at school, every morning I walk out, I feed my 3,000 catfish the weighed out, measured out allotment of feed that they're supposed to eat every single day. I walk out on that dock with their breakfast. You think every fish in that pond doesn't know what's going on after they've been on that pattern for a while? Yeah, absolutely they do. They're all sitting there waiting on you like pets.
Man, you're you're cracking my brain in all sorts of directions now. I feel stupid for not thinking of it this way, but it's like, Jesus, that's pretty obvious. And I've felt that way too, because there's been times where I've thrown stuff slightly different than people next to me and outfished them, 5-1, 10-1 almost sometimes.
Now,
And
for
it's
everybody
like,
listening who has a pond, especially if it's under 5 acres of water, don't fish it every day.
that's the hard part.
Give it a break. Find some other places to fish, because you're dealing with a smaller body of water. And the more you hit them, the more you fish them, the more you work them, the more you educate them. But here's the thing. If you pause and you don't get on a pattern, if you do it every day, that's a pattern. If you do it every other day, that's a pattern, right? But don't do it on a pattern. If they can't pattern you, they can't figure you out.
And that's tough, because I think, so many people, I feel like there's this kind of divide in bass fishing. You've got the pro guys and their boats that kind of look down on not necessarily bank fishing, but kind of like community fishing and stuff. And that's all some people have to fish. I grew up fishing it. A lot of people did. And there's some people around here that just pound those places. Literally, I can go there about any time, and I can guess a couple individuals that'll probably be there any day, and I've noticed a drop in those since I've seen that, like you're saying, production. And I kind of want to get into that, but I've had David's question up here. He asked, what's the best thing an individual can do to help a stunted lake, be it panfish or bass? And Shan and I were kind of talking about this beforehand. I know it's kind of tough because, if you're fishing a public place, you've got regulations and stuff. So you have to fish according to regulation. Don't risk, getting in trouble with the DNR and getting a fine and stuff. What can people do? Is there anything they can do?
Yeah, well, to clarify, when I'm talking about harvesting these fish, I'm talking about harvesting from private lakes that don't have, state laws.
Mm-hmm.
It's their own personal place usually around here, and the state laws don't apply. So if the state law, if your lake is stunted with 12-inch bass, but there's a 15-inch limit, you're just kind of stuck. It's going to be stunted until the biologists kind of change those laws. And yeah, you don't go in there and just follow the rules and have an educated talk with the biologist about what you're catching, and just contact those guys. Those guys are smart and they can help you figure it out.
They're good guys too. When you reach out to like DNR here in Iowa, the few run-ins that I've had, everybody's been cool. They're willing to talk.
Yeah, everybody. We all got into this because we love fishing, man. And these guys, one thing I can say about all the group of colleagues that I have, man, these guys are smart guys, like PhD level, like no joke. I barely got through that daggone school. That place is no joke, man. And they're not getting paid for the level of education that they had to. You know what I'm talking about? Like,
yep.
These guys are smart.
You're doing it because you love it and want to, not for the money.
Exactly. So, and I know the state guys, they take a lot of heat. People are all the time complaining at them and this and that. But, if you break it down, you look at the states and what they have on their budgets, and then look at the size of crew they have, and look at the skeleton crew they're managing all that water on, man,
that's just water. They're doing other stuff besides fishing. We're just only talking water,
Yeah. Those guys are almost walking on water, basically.
Well, Shan, I think that's a good point, though. What you bring up is because I think, nowadays we're so used to looking at everything on our phones, Instagram, all these other places. And it's like you see all these people catching trophies. Well, in my area, I don't catch a ton of big fish, and I think that's kind of the same. Like I was telling you before, we joke about Debo dinks, but here in Iowa, that's the way a lot of my places are, 15-inch limit. And I'm catching cookie cutter bass, on that jerkbait video I was talking about before, every fish was 13 inches minus, maybe 6 of them, a few 2-pounders. So I think that's a good eye opener for people that not every lake you go to is going to have a 10-pounder in it. They can get stunted. You have to consider where you're fishing.
Yes. And that's one of the things that I try to promote with my page. And because I've got so many beginners and, since COVID came and there's so many people new to fishing that are out there, and I love having them, love seeing them. I love taking the questions from them. And people apologize. Never, anybody watching, you don't have to apologize for asking me a question. I'm not going to big time you. I will do my best to answer it, But with all that new stuff and new people coming along, I'd like to see fishermen be more helpful and less competitive, It's gotten this way because I can remember when there was no competitive bass fishing. I'm old, and I'd really like to see, and that's kind of like the idea that I'm doing with my page. Just throw it out there and help people. Because
that's what we do here, man.
It's not available to them. And like my experience, especially, I just kind of got lucky in that my job allowed me to manage bass populations all these years, and honestly I wish it would have been a lot more experience. I've got some great experience at it, but it's probably not as much as most people think it would be. People would stop doing that.
Now you're getting all the questions. You open the floodgates.
I know, right? Jeez. I got sidetracked though. Sorry about that. What was the question again?
That's right. No, I think you answered. Just talking about some lakes don't have that size, so it's
So the thing I can take away from that is I've drained lakes before. Just literally like, all right, we're draining it for whatever. It's got a dam repair.
That's another thing. Yeah, that's another thing I want to get into too. That's another tangent.
Yeah, draining them down for other reasons. Besides just correcting the fishery. It needs work of some kind, so it has to be drained out. So a lot of times people spend an extra $10,000 for us to save all the fish, which is just a waste of money. Have a fish fry. It's okay. You're just going to have to learn to deal with the way the world is sometimes. Restock your lakes, not a big deal. I'm doing that live on my page, but when you pull the lake down, when you drain a lake, like I've done it enough times now that I can look at it and tell you, we're not going to get any big fish out of this lake, because it's got green sunfish in it, it's got brown bullhead catfish in it, it's got that in it, it's got
Crappie.
It's got too many trash fish in it. And I just know, you know what I just know? I just know by pulling the drain and looking at the bottom of the lake, there's no big fish in it.
That's interesting, and that's a great point. Like I said, people see that all the time, and you have to remember it's not every lake isn't a trophy lake. The spot you're fishing, 3 pound might be the biggest bass in there.
Probably
that's a trophy.
Yes, and so going back to what you said, that's what the point I wanted to touch on. Where you fish is way more important than how you fish, right? I got 9-year-old kids that have been pulled off their dock by 9-pound bass. Now, I'm sure you're an excellent fisherman. You've been fishing a long time. You've got a page dedicated to it.
Oh no, you're giving me way too much credit there. No, absolutely not.
Well, you would take the
7-pounder's my biggest here.
All over the country. This 9-year-old kid, you know what I mean? He's got a 9.5-pound fish. That's his personal best. But that doesn't make him Joe Bass fisherman, right? He happened to get a nice fish to swing at a pond behind his house where he fishes, because I made it so it could grow there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it makes complete sense, because you hear about people talking, these spillways. I could go to my spillway in Florida and catch an 8-pounder. That's nothing, or a golf course pond, or all these places, and it's like, it's tough because I'm not going to talk down to those people, or they're not. I would never say, oh, you're not a real angler. But it's like sometimes I don't want to take away from those people, but I want to build up the other people that are like, I can't catch one in my lake. Well, it might not be your lake, dude. You know, your lake 3-pounder might be the biggest there. It's not that you suck at fishing. Kind of like what you're saying. So
exactly, yeah. And so what I'm trying to do with my page is just teach people, look, this is the combinations. I'm going to do some YouTube videos next year about how to use a fishing rod to assess a fishery.
Interesting. Do you have a YouTube page now?
Yeah.
What is it?
Aquatic biologist.
The aquatic biologist. Okay, I think Philip in my chat sent me it, but yeah, for everybody else, aquatic biologist. And if you want to type it in, or I can, aquatic biologist. Is it just that?
Yes. I think so. I haven't been good at YouTube yet. I started out fast.
I'm still working at it too.
Yeah, I'm still kind of building. I'm trying to get to 10,000 on Instagram right now. I'm real close.
You'll get there, dude.
Yeah, I'm gonna get over to YouTube and do some longer format stuff. But
let's see. Let's grab a few more questions here. I've got so much I want to pick your brain on. Frank said, David, good question. Yes, that was a good question. And Frank, you won the giveaway on, speaking of swim baits, painted swim baits, you won that one of mine, but I think I lost your information. Hit me up now if you can, please. I want to get that out to you, and I don't have your address. So hit me up on Insta or send me an email, debosfishing@gmail.com. So I did see a few people up earlier talking about, so bass eat bass. Yep. We know bass eat bass, and I'm, like I said, I'm guilty of it too. We don't throw bass imitations, but do you think bass imitations in those places where bass are eating more bass, do you think they'll key in on that more? Yes. Ooh, okay. Well, damn, I'm really guilty of that then. Okay. And then another.
I don't have a bass pattern in my tackle box. I'll go home and get one.
Well, see, it's funny because a spook back in the day, you know, the only color spook I threw, baby bass, or a head and pop R, baby bass. You know how often I throw those now? Not nearly as much, you know, and it's that stuff comes around and it's, let's see. So those were good questions. And then Chris was saying,
we didn't quite finish the crawfish question. The kid asked the crawfish and we got sidetracked. So on the crawfish, they're going to eat crawfish. It's going to be part of their diet, but I've never gone to somebody's pond and been like, oh my God, you've got to stock more crawfish. I'm looking at relative abundance of bluegill, relative abundance of other fish, and the relative weight of the bass, which is basically comparing the bass's weight to average weights.
Yeah, and do you have that? That's a perfect segue.
Yeah, we have that chart right here.
So if you all remember the video, I tried to get a picture of the video, but in that a couple videos ago, when I was fishing that jerkbait out of my John boat, I talked about the measurement from Shan, or the little measuring tape. Mine's not as cool as his. Mine is just like the little one that Philip hooked me up with. And so tell us, what's the deal with this, Shan?
Okay, so as you can see, this is a sticker. I designed it. Like, see that?
And do you have a place where people can buy these, like on a website, or?
Yeah, I'm doing it with Mossy Oak. Actually, we're developing some decals.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, so that should be coming out pretty soon.
I'd like to buy one of those from you, one of the actual measurement ones.
So there's a reason why this is blank, and it's because I don't measure fish under 10 inches. So you don't really need to know these numbers. They're forage, bait, dinks.
Hey, we know a lot of those. I catch a lot of fish that are bait. I see what you're doing here.
Yeah. So the 11s. Let's see. There we go. The red numbers are there for a reason. I pay close attention to the red number bass because that's where bass tend to get stuck. The 11 to 14s.
I catch so many 13-inch bass. In a lot of the places it's silly.
So right there, that 13-inch bass, 1.1 pounds on average. So back in the 50s, they averaged every single 13-inch bass in North America, and they come out to 1.1 pounds. Now, what does that mean to us now? It means a lot. Because back in the 50s, people kept fish. The average size bass in America was bigger in the 50s than it is now. People have been doing catch and release since the late 70s, early 80s. It's reversed the whole thing. you'll be hard pressed to find fish. You'll be hard pressed to find a lake that produces fish over what used to be average. That's why I use my old school numbers, because that used to be average. And I can promise you, most places you won't find any lakes that produce bass over that. It's because there's too many of them. You've got to thin them down.
And that makes sense. Dude, that makes total sense because, and I guess it's strange that they don't do it. We kind of talked beforehand. There's more to it than just trying to grow big fish. You know, Shan's job is to go into a place and try to grow big, huge trophy bass, right? So there's no issue taking out the 12-inch bass. You know, how often do you hear on my channel 13, 14-inch bass? I guess 14 was pound and a halfer, but pound and a halfer is kind of another joke here because anywhere we go, I can catch pound and a halfers. It seems like it's nothing. That's a 13, 14-inch fish around here. Mm-hmm. And it seems strange that more of the places here wouldn't have like a slot limit, like keep bass that are 13 to 16 inches long or something like that, right? And anything over that you have to let go.
So that's my slot limit right there. I watch when I'm doing my sampling, and like I said on my videos, here's what I'm going to do. We're going to take this little sticker, right? And every single time we catch a bass, we're going to weigh it and measure it. We're going to write it down on a notebook every single time. And then that starts to form a data set, because that's exactly how I collect data with my electrofishing boat. The electrofishing boat's not some kind of magic boat. The only thing it does is put fish in my hands quickly. If you weigh and measure every single fish you catch and give me that information, I don't need a shock survey. I just need the measurements on like 50 bass and some bluegill and any other fish that you've caught, right? You can assess your own fishery with these numbers. It's easy. So that's what I'm going to show people how to do. Like, cut through all the crap and be like, look, this is how you know where your bass are at. Like, my 12-inch bass are underweight. Okay, keep some of them. But my 16s are looking good. Okay, don't keep any of those. You know, it's really that easy when you have a frame of reference.
And I think that's the tough part is, you know, we have to stay in rules and regulations, you know, like I was saying, you know, a lot of the places around here, 15-inch limits. So, you know, if they would change that to, you know, keep anything from 12 to 15 or to 16 or whatever, anything, you know, above that you have to let go, or above, like for walleye around here, they'll do certain like slot limits too. Like you can only catch and keep one above this, or, you know, something like that. But, you know, you've got to work with what you've got. You've got to stay within regulation. You don't want to be caught taking a bucket full of 12 inches out when 15 inches is your limit. It's, you know, it's not worth it.
Well, one thing that comes to mind when you start talking that way is, see, now I'm talking about simple systems, you know, I'm talking about ponds and small lakes. Going up north, okay, you've added something completely different, because most of the time I'm talking about man-made lakes down here. You could be talking about naturally occurring lakes up there. You're also probably talking about lakes that have pike and muskie, which is a higher level feeder than largemouth bass. So you have multiple levels of differences that I don't have any experience with, right? And I'm just saying, I don't know. I'm just grasping at straws. I don't know if this is a fact or not, but you could have something going on with a pike population that causes that bass population.
Sure. It's the whole ecosystem. Everything is one you have to look at.
It gets more and more. The more species of fish that you layer into a system, the more complex it gets, and the harder it gets to manage. And that's why I tell people on our small ponds, we keep it basic. 10 acres and under, bass and bluegill forage only. Don't go crazy with 800 different species of fish. You're shooting yourself in the foot. Throw some bluegill in there. They spawn monthly. Throw some high protein feed to them. Throw some bass in on them. Don't try to reinvent the wheel.
Man, we're going some, dude. I can't even come up with questions. Okay, Neil, with the donation. Thank you for the donation, Neil. He said, I'm in Pennsylvania. When it's cold, fluorocarbon is crap and it breaks very easily. I'm wondering, how do people use it during the winter? I've been using mono.
Change your fluorocarbon, dude.
Yeah, so I wonder how old it is, or if you're going too small. So you're saying if it breaks too easy, are you going like 8-pound around wood, Neil? Like, I usually go heavier than I should. And I guess maybe, Shan, that's another good question for you. This is one that I get caught with a ton of people. And actually, it might have been Philip that was talking to you about it. How important is line visibility, line shy, kind of that whole spectrum with fish. Do you believe in
Mhm.
straight fluorocarbon versus straight braid, or do you believe in diameter? Do you believe water temp, like, or not water temp, watercolor is more important? Where do you fall on that?
I mean, it's one of those, it depends, you know.
From
I
what
think
you,
to me it depends on, I'm changing line diameter size based on technique, based on what I'm presenting. So am I
Mhm.
drop shotting a 3-inch, mini something down in there? Yeah, I'm gonna want 6 or 8 pound fluoro, you
And
know.
that's for the action of the bait too, because if you try putting that on 20-pound fluoro, it's not
And
gonna,
again, it's not
it's
gonna
gonna be like
get the
wire.
action that you want, right? Now, does that mean I'm not gonna? I also pay attention to line diameter in like the heavily pressured lakes. Like over here, we have Lake Lanier, and like it's pretty noticeable. If you get up over 10-pound test line, you get less bites. If you drop out, I don't know, 5 rods with live bait, the one with the 6-pound test line will get bit the most.
Okay.
But I don't know if it's from the line and them seeing the line, or if it's because it's given a different action to the fish.
That's a great point. Yep. And
I don't know.
I don't think that's a
I
very
don't
good point.
know. But I kind of did an experiment on that because over at my little reservoir over here is a pretty good place to catch some decent bass, but not for numbers, just big fish. But I like it because if you do get on like a 4 or 5 fish day, that's a numbers day over there. Um, and it seems to be a real good gauge on lures that are productive because it's such a hard fish to lake to fish.
Mm-hmm.
I've just noticed like the first time I got a 5/8 bellows gill in my hand, I took it over there and caught an 8-pound bass in 20 minutes. Just jumped all over it, you know. And then I continued on to have some real good days at many other impoundments with that bigger bellows gill, you
And do
know.
you think, going back to what you said earlier, being a kid, do you think it was because they'd never seen that before?
Yeah, I pay close attention to just swapping out like the lure sizes. I love all the big, like the big stuff. I got one right here. This thing.
Mm.
That's like an 8-inch bellows stick. I've been nailing them on that. Those guys sent me a bunch of them, so I've been just using bellows stuff. But yeah, great plug, great lure. Oversized. I go oversized a lot, and I go undersized a lot. Especially in the winter.
Mm-hmm.
But got a question coming in.
Yep.
Sterile grass carp versus chemicals, pondweed, hydrilla control, HOA, 550 acre lake. Oh no, man, you're that's kind of a myth. People you hear that a lot about grass carp ruining your bass fishing. That's not what happens at all. Grass carp are vegetarians. Grass carp, they're like cows. They literally cannot process protein in their stomach. Okay, they don't eat meat. They eat plants, and they do eat some fish food from time to time. But they're really good. I would for hydrilla and pondweed. I would highly recommend you get some. You're going to need 5,500 of them, 10 an acre, so it'll be pretty costly to do, but it will be cheaper than trying to control those plants with chemicals, and it'll also be better for the environment than trying to control those plants with chemicals. But also, if those plants are really out of control, I would do both. I would stock my grass carp and then have a chemical control program to back up the grass carp so they can get on top of your problem. But your bass don't ruin the bass fishing. They ruin. Generally, what happens is those weed beds set real defined lines up, especially hydrilla. So on your hydrilla lakes with a hydrilla stick, it crowds. It's like a big lake, and it crowds the fish down in the summertime and puts them all out on a real hard weed edge so people can find them really easy. And when you get rid of the hydrilla, they spread back out and get on all other types of structure, and people throw a crap fit telling you that you ruined the lake But you haven't changed any part of how many fish are in the lake. You've only changed where they're hanging out by getting rid of those hydrilla lines. Like Lake Seminole, places in Georgia where they've controlled hydrilla. People always have a fit about it and say it's ruined the lake. I've never heard a fisheries biologist say that though. Like when you look at the cost of a 550-acre lake, man, you'd be a fool not to put grass carp in it. I mean, you could have $100,000 worth of aquatic weed chemicals. You could have, I mean, it could be bad, you know, especially with hydrilla. Good Lord. It depends on what you treat it with, but that's going to cost you money, and that's going to cost you money every year. So
that's a good point. Yeah. The grass keeper kind of
in there, so they chew it down for you. And on 550 acres, that's working into the budget. So the HOA is stocking them every year. Not many, 3 or 4 an acre.
Another good one we got here is from Patrick. Many people do not understand biomass and how that limits bass size.
Yeah, you're right about that, Patrick. People don't understand biomass and how it works at all, really. So let's take a 1 acre pond. And I'm going to use the numbers for here in Georgia. We have unproductive water here. We don't have limestone in the soil, a lot of clay. So if you just dig a hole out there in 1 acre pond and fill it up with water and throw bluegill in it, what's going to happen is those bluegill are going to spawn over the next couple of years, and they're going to stun out because there's nothing there to control their numbers, right? So you're going to have a whole pond full of bluegill about this big that probably will stop spawning, and they look terrible. They're not edible. They're skinny. It's just not good. But if you drain that water down, you drain the pond down and collect all those bluegill up, you're going to have about 100 pounds of them. That's what the lake can support in fish. Now, fill it back up, stock it with the proper numbers of bluegill and bass, let it go for 2 more years. Since there's bass in the system, now the bluegill have something to control their numbers. Bass ate some of the bluegill. Bluegill kept spawning, making babies. They work together real well. You got really healthy bluegill, really healthy bass. Everything looks great. Drain that lake down. You still got 100 pounds of fish.
Makes sense. Yep. Mix between the bass and the bluegill now in a healthy population.
Now, you put too many bass in there. They eat too many bluegill down. They get stuck all 8 inches long. You got a bluegill population that's got a bunch of 1 inchers, a few 8 inchers that are cracking out fish every month, and barely putting enough forage to keep all those 8-inch bass alive. Now I've just described a bass heavy system, and they get stuck right there. You got 8-inch bass that are 10 years old because you have no idea that a bass can stay 8 inches long and 10 years old.
So it's kind of like the fish tank thing, right? You know, they'll grow to the size that they have type thing. And if there's 100 of them in there, they can't.
They'll grow to the size of the food they have available, to the forage they can consume. And it's literally the bass growth is like a balloon. How do you make a balloon bigger?
Keep blowing it up.
There you go. It's no different.
Keep feeding them. As long as they have the space and they have enough food, they're just going to keep going.
They're going to keep going. So when you know what the average size is from our chart, and you start catching your bass, like I said, you put it on my chart, you put it down there, and you go, hey, that bass is 1/10 of a pound light. That bass is 1/10 of a pound light. That bass is 2/10 of a pound light. That bass is 2/10 of a pound light. And you chew 100 bass, you catch 100 bass over the season, and every single one of them is 1/10 to 2/10 of a pound light from my chart. Doesn't that give you information? It gives you a lot of information. And if you know if you know about the biology of the bass and you know about the biology of the forage, you can fix it.
That's a lot. Yeah, dude, that's my mind's going so many different places right now. Critical asked a really good question, and this is, I think, one that probably a lot of people get wrong. Top 3 threats to bass fishing. what do you think the top 3 threats are to bass fishing? And I guess maybe, so when I'm reading this, I guess there's other outside external factors, but I'm critical gravy. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm thinking like, what are the 3 big things that are going to ruin like bass fishing when you go to a spot? So I'm thinking like, oh, it's because people put pike in there, or you're keeping too many, or you're putting too many back, or I guess that's the way I'm reading it. Correct me if I'm wrong, but like in your experience, Shan, what are the 3 biggest things that hurt bass fishing in a lake?
I'll catch and release. If you
Putting back every fish.
Throwing back every fish is not how I manage bass fisheries. Like, it's just not. It doesn't work that way. And catch and release is great for trout. Catch and release is great for lots of different fish. You know, catch and release is a great fisheries management tool. But there are times when you don't need it. There are times when you've got to harvest.
Mm-hmm.
And if you continue to catch and release into a time when you need to harvest, you're doing those fish a disservice. You're not doing your job as a land manager or as an angler, as a steward to the environment. If you're letting fish, now, right now we've got a bunch of people letting fish starve, not knowing it. They don't understand that when the fish is under this weight, it's starving to death.
Not healthy.
You know what I mean? It's
kind of like the deer population here. The same thing. The reason for, people, dog on hunting, but what people don't understand is if those deer weren't being hunted and harvested, you'd have overpopulation, you'd have starvation, a much bigger impact of disease when there's a much bigger population that close in proximity. There's so many different things. Car wrecks, more car accidents from it. And
yeah, that's they teach all this stuff in a class called Fish and Wildlife Biology for a reason. It's the exact same principles.
Yep. Matthew asked, and I'm guessing on your question earlier, and this is kind of another one that I wanted to talk about here because I'm gonna be selfish and try to get some fishing tips out of you, I guess, kind of tagged onto this one. But Matthew, who's a big swim bait fisherman, super good guy, he was testing out some baits for me. He asked if the lake has tons of carp or river, would the bass eat those smaller carp, or is that a myth as well?
Oh, absolutely not. They'll eat them. I've actually seen bass eat carp. So
okay.
The problem,
so again,
opportunistic, the problem with the carp is they get so big so fast that they get bigger than even the biggest bass can eat. And then that goes back into what the other cat was talking about, biomass, right? Mm-hmm. So let's think about, say we've got a 1 acre pond again, and it's holding that 100 pounds of fish per acre, but it's got 5 10-pound carp in it.
You've cut half of what else can be.
Half of your biomass is tied up in trash fish. Now you've got 50 pounds of fish per acre of bluegill and bass. That's
so
how it works.
Yeah, see that. So that's where it does become. So like you were saying before, they're great for keeping the weeds and stuff down, but
no, those are grass carp, not common carp.
Oh, did he say?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I was reading that as common carp. Now.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry.
I made a recommendation about grass carp that control hydrilla. That's a completely different fish.
So we're talking like the
common
Asian carp.
Yeah. Do not put common carp in your lake, so you don't want them.
And that's kind of another thing. So we've got places here where people have taken it into their own hands to stock ponds or stock lakes, not ponds.
Oh yeah.
So we've had 2 or 3 really nice lakes that I grew up fishing. They had to drain them all down because they were completely full of shad, or shad should have never been in there, or yellow bass. I don't know if you guys have yellow bass down there.
Don't have them, but I know what you're talking about.
Okay. So we've had probably 2, 3 places up here that were drained in the past few years because of that. So I guess I don't know how to tag that question in, but some of the places that I fish have so many shad in it, and this could just really be anywhere, not just here because of me, but like what you were saying earlier, the shad grows so quick, so fast that you get those big shad that they can't eat. And then you've also got all those tiny shad. How do you pick apart a place like that? Like if you go to a spot that's heavy on shad, are you just trying to be different? How do you tackle that? I know that's kind of a lot to throw in a question.
No, that's a pretty good question there. Let's see. So we're talking about gizzard shad.
Yep.
So I like gizzard shad. The problem that you described, exactly what you described, is the carp problem and the gizzard shad problem. Gizzard shad can get up on top of you, and they can tie up so much biomass that no other fish in the lake can live there.
They're just choking them out.
Right. But there's a flip side of that coin. And the flip side of that is if you have enough predators in place that can handle those gizzard shad produce a bass fishery like no other forage. Right? So it's kind of a double-edged sword. And if you know how to use it, you can take the other edge off of it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also using it in small lakes. It's no problem for me to drain the lake if I screw up. I don't screw up, but I'm just saying if something goes awry, I can fix it.
As opposed to a
2,000
acres
or whatever. That's a completely different thing, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So again, I try to make those points because sometimes people want to take what I'm saying and apply it to something else, and it's apples to oranges.
Yep. Yep.
But those gizzard shad, all right, so I can tell you a lot about gizzard shad, actually. They'll stun out on you just like that. If I can't drain the system, I'll run gill nets at the shad. Drop gill nets, let those fish, all the time. Just be working gill nets all the time, as much as you can work them. And get as many of the large shad out of the lake as possible.
I'll see if I can find that picture. Go ahead.
They're very susceptible to electricity, so I've used my shocking boat to remove gizzard shad. I've actually seen them so bad that you just touch the pedal of the shocking boat and literally the entire surface of the water on a 40-acre lake just goes nuts.
I can believe it, dude.
Yeah,
there's been
really sensitive, man. They're really sensitive to it.
Here's one that one of my subscribers. Hopefully, I don't think his information's on there. Let me double check. I don't want to be giving people's information out. But here's one they caught, for example, on a KVD 1.5. Yeah. Look at how big. That's bigger than most of the bass that I catch.
Right.
That thing's a monster. When you've got those, and then you've also got I've been in one of my local lakes here, literally on the fish finder. It's like the water's moving. I mean, you're going over these, and it's 100 yards of just shad everywhere, and it's are you realistically going to catch fish when it's like that, when they've got so much natural, little 2-inch shad to catch? How do you trick them into eating an artificial lure?
Right. And that's okay. So that's where it gets extremely difficult. What you're describing is the local reservoir that I have by my house. It's predominantly gizzard shad forage based. About 10 years ago, it had a big shad die off, and I think they stocked some hybrids in there. But I think the hybrids are gone now, and haven't heard anybody catching any hybrids in a while. The population is decent. I mean, I would consider it produces trophy bass, but it doesn't produce them consistently. So, and by not consistently, I mean, I caught one over 9 this year, but I also went 22 trips with zeros.
Oh, wow.
So
Easter famine type thing.
Exactly. And I'm also even when I'm going there and doing well, it's one bite a trip, So, but again, I'm fishing in a lake that's low with bass, high with forage. I'm going there on purpose to catch big bass. I don't want to catch a 1-pound bass. I don't care if I ever see a 1-pound bass ever again in my whole life. Honestly, I've seen so many.
Shan's confirmed that he and I will not be fishing together, at least up here.
I prefer my lake over here. I'd rather go get zeroed than catch 21-pounders because I've done so much of that. It just bores me. I can't do it anymore.
And that's, kind of going back to the lakes, fishing is different for everyone. And there's certainly the people throwing the big swim baits. You see that now. There's a huge, almost like an underground following of throwing these big 8-10-inch swim baits to catch those, trophy fish. And I think you do a lot of that too. Like you were showing the bull shad, and I've seen you throwing larger swim baits. And that's, I guess, a whole nother tangent. Do you believe? And I'm sorry, I cut you off there. What were you saying before? I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. I don't even know
what
I was talking about. I was reading the question. We were talking about carp.
Oh, we were talking about gizzard shad, going there and getting skunked when you go there because you want to catch the trophy fish, not.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I mean, in that particular lake, that's okay. That particular lake puts you, if you understand that concept, if you understand going 20 times with no bites and then finally getting one to swing, all right, if you can go do that and not be upset, you know what I mean? Just go do it because I don't get mad. It's not an emotional thing for me. I know if I throw 10,000 times, I'm bringing one back. I'm just going to go throw 10,000 times.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care what the lure is. I don't care what color it is. I'm going to pure grind you out. That's how I'm going to beat it. That's how I catch fish. I'm going to throw it and throw it and throw it and throw it and throw it again.
Well, that's a perfect point. I tell people that all the time because people go out and expect to catch fish on every trip and expect to have great days.
Nope.
And I tell them fishing is a numbers game. If I go out and fish 20 days this month versus you pick 2 days to go out this month, my chances of catching fish are drastically higher because I've got more of a chance, you know.
Absolutely.
And some people just don't understand that or don't have the time. So I'm glad you brought that up too. That's a good eye opener for people. Is every trip isn't going to be a home run.
Well, and I think too, especially with the way things are going, and like, okay, so let's use private lake fishing, and like I'm showing people what's possible, and this conversation will be better in about 6 or 8 months when the bass are probably about 3 pounds in a year, and people are shocked, you know. People don't realize how fast a lake comes back after you drain it.
That was actually another question I wanted to ask, and I skipped it.
Yeah.
They said after, where was it here? They said after you drain or redo a lake. Oh, here we go. Sycamore. After harvest and adjustment. So let's say you do that, you drain one and you rework it. How long before you're going to see those results? Okay,
so like we talked about earlier in the podcast, I don't like to talk about what's happened in the past, but we'll do that a little bit right now. I had a guy with about 1.5 acres of water. The last time I stocked, the rate that I stocked, I'm doing one live right now. It's on my IGTV. I've gone out once a week. I do a live shot thing out there, whatever that's called. And I just talk like this about pond stuff, right? So the last time I stocked a lake like this, or a pond like this is, like I said, it's 1.5 acres. And the one I'm working on now is 2.5. But the guy called me after the initial stocking. I did the bluegill was in the fall, and then the bass went in about June, late May, I think, that year. They were a little early that year. And I stocked the cheapest bass I can get, just 1 inch, 1 to 2 inch, as soon as they come available in the spring. And stocked them for the guy. So he calls me back a year later, actually 11.5 months later. And he said, how big should these bass be? And I said, well, I don't know, man. I'd be disappointed if they're not 12 inches long. And I said, they could be as high as, depends on how much you've been feeding. I said, they could be as high as 16. He goes, well, I've been feeding every day. I'm like, well, they should be pretty big then. How big are they? He goes, I just came up from my pond. I paid you 11 months ago. I'm like, right. He goes, I caught 3 bass down there in 15 minutes. One of them was 15 inches. One of them was 15.25 inches. And the other one was 15.5. And they were all 2, 2, 2, 2, 4 in 11.5 months.
That's crazy.
So you'll be catching fish bigger than you catch now. You know what I mean? In 12 months.
Yeah, if it's done right. Man, that's the hard part with a lot of us fishing, public waters. We kind of deal with what we got. Sometimes
now let's continue that conversation on, right? Because next year, guess how big those fish are? They're 4. Year 3, guess how big they are? They 8.
Damn.
Yeah, you ever go to a 10-acre pond that every fish in it is 3 years old and 8 pounds, 7, 8 pounds?
Well, I've never caught an 8-pounder, so no.
It's a stupid amount of fun, man. I mean, it really is.
Dude, no, I would love to. If I had a place, I would.
Thing, man, I know when I've done a good job, they don't ever call you back again.
Sure. Yep. Yeah, you're only going to hear about the bad
people again.
So that's a good question. So with your experience catching bigger fish, I've kind of been running through here looking at comments and questions. How big of a role does the whole bigger bass eat bigger bait play? I mean, have you caught just as many big bass on smaller things like a Ned rig or something?
Oh, versus... sure. I'm all the time. Well, I used to pitch in high school, so I got a pitcher's mentality. And you change your speeds, you change your locations, right? In and out, up and down, fast and slow, braking. You know what I'm talking about? You're constantly mixing things up, throwing different things at the, in the game there. And that's the mentality I take to bass fishing. I'm going to go out with what I think I want to be on the day. And then I'm going to start changing. And I can remember we were fishing a little pond, me and my friend Mickey, not long ago, maybe 6 months ago. And we weren't doing any good that day. Everybody was scaled down. Everybody was slow. They were fishing from the bank. I was fishing from the boat. It's only like a 3-acre pond, but a lot of cypress trees in the middle. So I was just pitching a robo worm on a drop shot up in all the little cypress roots, just trying to get anything. Nothing, just zeros. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going away from the small stuff. I'm going away from the subtle. I'm going away from all. I tied on what I showed you earlier, 8-inch bellow stick. Second cast, 6-pound bass. And I truly believe it's because I went to something so grossly oversized that the fish triggered on it. And I think that is hitting on kind of like that reaction strike we were talking about earlier.
Instead of working for peanuts, if somebody throws a huge wad of just goodness in their face,
like,
well, I've never seen that.
I can't not. I can't not hit that. It's worth it. And it's like a trigger. Again, I think about triggering bass to feed, So if you could trigger that instinct, that thought, if they have it, I don't know. I think instinct's probably a better word. But if you can make a crankbait deflect off a rock and cut in front of the fish and it'll just grab it, right? I really feel like that going in there, even if all I did with that bellow stick was go in there and let that thing settle in and pick it up, fish was on it. I didn't even have to move it. You know what I mean? It was just, as it was falling, it picked it up. And that was the spot that we had been fishing around all afternoon. I mean, it had seen every single lure in 3 anglers' tackle boxes. And as soon as that bellow stick fell in front of its face, bang.
Yeah.
So mix it up. And, just like I said, is the big stuff not working? Go the other way. What, are you going to catch less?
Right. Yeah, if you're already not catching them. Right. Well, dude, we're at an hour. I'm at an hour 12. I'm going to do a giveaway quick. If you want to stay on and answer a couple more questions, we can do that. Okay. We'll give maybe 10 more minutes and then we'll get out of here. I've got a pretty slick, my buddy Fishing with Gramps showed me here. Whoops. StreamYard giveaway. So it's pretty easy. So we're going to do our hashtag here and flip over and share. Shan, you're going to be the guest hashtag today.
Oh, cool.
Because you graced us with the knowledge. So you're going to see a lot of hashtag Shan talk in the comments. Okay. So right now I'm giving, so if you're joining late, Shan, the aquatic biologist with us tonight, an absolute freaking wealth of information, man. My head is, I'm a bass nerd. I'm not a pro. I haven't caught monster fish, but I love to fish. And I really nerd out like on the scientific part of it, all the stuff that you're talking about. How do you get better? That's something I always try to do. How do you learn more? How do you get better? And Shan has really done that for us tonight, really opened up my eyes. Hopefully it's been informational for you all. I've enjoyed it. But if I don't know where the hell I put my box. I've got a Monster Bass box. Monster Bass allow me to pick 9 baits. I put that box together. I've talked about it a bunch. I'm giving one of those away. So I'm going to give you a few minutes here. I'm going to go through some of the old questions. Hit Shan with a couple rapid fires here. In a few minutes, I'll pick a winner. And then if everything is done, questions, nothing else, we will get out of here. I know you're an hour ahead, so I don't want to steal too much of your time, my friend.
I'm fine, dude. It's no problem. Georgia won today. It's all good.
Hey, Minnesota won today. It was really weird cheering for those little varmints, but
right.
It allowed the Hawks to get into the Big Ten championship. So Hawks, and is that next Saturday at 6? I think Big Ten championship. Hawks.
Yeah, everybody's the SEC Wolverines. Championship next weekend. That'll be.
And
good.
They were who's Georgia playing?
For the championship or today?
Did they play today?
They played Georgia Tech today.
Oh, okay. That's not what I was looking at. I was looking at
But they
the
play
finals.
Alabama in the SEC championship next weekend.
That's who it was. Okay. Yeah, because
Yeah,
wasn't Alabama down or something I was thinking today I saw? Or...
They
I don't
thumped
remember.
Georgia Tech, but they're on a rebuilding year. That was kind of expected.
Let's see. By golly, there were some other questions up here I wanted to hit. There was a couple questions about snakeheads. Matthew asked about snakeheads. How big of like a, we hear about the invasive species and snakeheads are going to ruin stuff. How big of a detriment have you seen them in local fisheries?
Well,
Has there been? Or are they no
fortunately,
different?
I
Really
haven't
than
seen them at all.
okay.
We don't
Is
have
it
them here.
is it kind of the same thing as like pike and muskie up here? I mean, they're kind of eating the same stuff. I don't feel like they're just
Absolutely,
gonna
yeah. They're going to
go.
be a problem. I would say that if you're catching snakeheads, you need to kill them. Don't throw them back.
If it's legal there, right? Because some places you can't, right?
I would
Or
imagine
can you anywhere?
it's a non-native fish. You know,
Okay.
it's not gonna. It's gonna. It shouldn't have any regs for throwing it back. Actually, the regulation should be kill every one of them you see.
Kill on, so yeah, take out. It's kind of the same thing for carp and spots that we have.
Yeah,
up
there's
here.
just not. We don't have enough predator. There's nothing there to control their numbers. You know, they're not a native fish.
Yep. Nothing's eating them unless they're small.
So they're going to eat
right?
everything. You know.
Yep.
And that could be a real problem with your fish. Literally, like one example of how that works with another species of fish is here in Georgia. We have the Altamaha River, and a couple rivers form in middle Georgia, and it flows down to the coast and goes in near Darien to the Atlantic down there. And the Altamaha used to be world-class redbreast fishery and shellcracker fishery, and basically just air quotes sunfish or brim or whatever fishery. And I mean literally world class. I'm talking like 10-inch, 12-inch. I mean these things were just ridiculous. But somebody from Santee Cooper decided one day to bring some flathead catfish over there. And now the last time I saw a survey, there was like 900 pounds of flathead catfish, electrofish out of the lake out of the river per hour. So catching flathead is no problem, but you can kiss that sunfish, that world-class sunfish fishery goodbye, right? So there's an example of how non-native fish can cause problems.
That makes sense. I did see a couple, and I don't know if this is going to open up too big of a can of worms, but fishing during the spawn. So up north, there's places that have, seasons you can't fish during spawn. Like around here, we don't have that here in Iowa.
Right.
Do you notice a huge, impact of guys fishing spawn?
Well,
Gals?
that's the thing. Around here, you're allowed to fish off the bed. You can catch fish off the bed.
Yep.
So, no, I don't have a problem with that at all. And again, are we talking about bass fishing?
Bass.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, I have no problem with you. And I don't know anything I don't have smallmouth bass here, so I'm not going to touch on that. You know what I mean? I'm talking about largemouth bass in small environments. Don't worry about it. I wish they spawned less.
Really?
Yeah. If you could interfere with the spawn more, you'd be doing me a favor.
Is that because we're going back to numbers and?
Yeah, they're crowded anyway.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So what do you want them spawning for?
So is it more? So would you say it's more because? So again, kind of going back to what we talked about. Let me grab a winner here real quick. We'll get this done in case anybody's just hanging around for the giveaway. We're gonna draw. And this is fun because it takes all the guesswork out. I don't have to ask any questions or anything. Is it going to be Kent Bailey? Kent, hopefully you're still on. I forgot to say that earlier. The only deal is you have to be on when I announce so I can make sure you're here. You can't just jump in and throw a thing in and then leave. I forget to say that every time. So far, I haven't had anybody leave, enter the giveaway, and then just roll out on me. Kent, are you in here? While we see if he's in here before I redraw. Where was I going with that? Damn it. We were talking about spawn. Oh, so the problem you see here is, okay, Kent, you're still here. Hit me. Can you send me an email, DEBO'S Fishing? That's the easiest for me to manage. If you can please send me an email. Otherwise, hit me up on Instagram. So what we see here, Shan, is, a lot of that 15-inch fish. And then unfortunately, I see, a ton of people, the random guy, I'll be grinding my butt off all day with the spinnerbait and catch a few 1-pounders. And then I happen to be walking past the fishing jetty with the guy that has a 5-pounder on a stringer. I'm like, hey, how the hell did that guy catch it? What is he doing when he's sitting here on his cooler with, some minnows, and I can't catch anything? And
Yeah.
B, why is he keeping it? Because that's the tough part we see is all these 15-inchers are going back, and it's almost breeding, or I shouldn't say breeding, but welcoming that stunted growth, because you can't keep anything under 15, and then you got the guys taking out the big, huge ones, the bigger ones. So like, I don't know, is that kind of adding to it all, right? I mean, it's kind of adding.
Well, again, I would have to look at or is there something else? Is there another fish out there that they're managing? Like muskie or something, tiger,
that's true,
or something I'm not familiar with. You could be in a situation where all your bass are small because they're literally getting their souls crushed out by northerns or muskie, and they're just 6 months old, and they're not going to be there by the end of the winter. They're going to get chewed through, and you're literally just catching young bass every year that are forage, that are spawn. I mean, that's I don't know. I have never even really sampled. That's something that I would definitely expect to see. Bass just simply not being able to survive that onslaught. They're just forage at that point.
Okay, that's another good point, because most of the places I fish here have pike. Not all of them. Most of them have pike. So, I mean, you're probably not going to see as big of bass in those spots as you would a non-pike.
Should work this way, though. If you could find a lake that's stunted with pike, like a lot of small pike, it should hold big bass.
Because they're just eating them when they're small and they can't get big.
To survive will get ahead of the pike, and the pike can't eat them. And then there won't be many of them, so they'll have plenty of forage, and then you would have a trophy largemouth bass.
Okay.
That's how that dynamic should break down.
Interesting. That puts a good spin on it. So the places you're catching big pike, more than likely, you're probably not going to be catching a ton of big bass.
Nope. Just like you wouldn't expect to catch trophy bluegill in a pond I catch 10-pound bass in.
Or for the flatheads, like you said before. Yeah. Okay.
They're going to crush their souls out. They're going for the big meals.
That makes sense. Okay. And the traveling fisherman said, another good supporter, does taking out the big breeders from ponds hurt those bodies of water?
Nah, because bass spawn when they're 8 inches long.
Okay. So it's really what you'd be hurting is your average size. If they're taking the big ones, it's just going to take time for them to get there.
Doing everything towards smaller bass if you just keep harvesting the big bass.
Okay. Now that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Let's see. Let's take a couple more questions, and I'm going to give Shan his night back. I appreciate you jumping on again on short notice, dude. This has been so much fun for me. I'm nerding out.
No problem, man. Anytime.
Chris Russ says minnows. That's a running joke on my channel. We always see the
What's wrong with minnows, man? I like minnows.
Oh, nothing at all wrong with minnows. It's a running joke between me and Randy, because we'll be going around trying to catch stuff, and then it's the old boy with a bucket of minnows who hauls in a 5-pounder, and I'm like,
you betcha.
Why am I wasting my time with all these rods, all these lures, when I could have literally went to Fleet Farm, grabbed a bucket of minnows, and caught a 5-pounder today? So it's just a running joke. I have nothing against it, especially ice season. Minnows are good.
Now, see, I've never done that before. I'd like to do that.
No, never ice fished?
No.
Oh, it's no. So my old man used to bring me out and sit me on a bucket, and I froze my strawberries off when I was a kid, and I hated it. But now that I've got a hut and a heater, it's not bad at all. It's a good time. Let's see. Give us a couple more questions, fishing friends. Let's see. I thought pike, like the pike's favorite food. I thought pike don't normally care to eat bass, but are just territorial. So is that just kind of a opportunistic predator thing? If the bass are there to eat, they're going to eat them. And
that's the funny thing. I hear this about like bass, especially. Have you ever heard like somebody say, "Well, I don't really think a great white shark likes to eat that."
Picky, not so much. If they're hungry, they're just going to eat it.
Lions don't like to eat those. You never heard that either. If they can catch it, they can kill it, they're going to eat it. There is
Mhm.
absolutely no difference in the mentality between a lion, a great white shark, or a largemouth bass. And I would imagine those pike will crush them out. I mean, I've caught pike before. In the lakes that I caught like a whole bunch of pike, I didn't catch any largemouth bass.
Yeah,
you
we
know?
see that here, and that's kind of the thing here is if we're in a spot where we're catching pike, unless I want to, pike are fun to catch on topwater. But if we're fishing out, we're catching pike, it's like we might as well move on. There's probably not going to be bass just living in harmony with them here, I guess you'd
No,
say.
no, they're gonna get smashed.
Yeah, they're going to get out of Dodge. So Chris asked a question, another Iowa boy. How do you know what size of bass you should keep? So I think we kind of touched on that. And favorite memory from the Braves World Series run.
Well, let's see. Again, let's go back to the chart weights. I'll be catching fish. If it's a 13-inch fish should weigh 1.1. A 14-inch fish should weigh 1.5. All the way out. We can go the other way. Sorry, it's clocked in reverse.
Yep.
To me,
Making you think.
I don't understand. So what does that say? 25 is 9.3.
That's crazy. Because hold up your chart again.
Sure.
I think both of the like 6-pounders that I caught were like 23 inches. So those should have been 7.1 pounds.
Yeah, on the average.
I got screwed.
7
Thanks,
pounds.
Iowa.
Right, at 23. So if I sampled that fish, it depends on when you caught that fish too. You got to kind of factor.
True.
In,
Yep.
Did you get it like right after it spawned? And it's like, a little bit light, maybe a few tenths of a pound light. Okay, maybe I'm
Makes
not.
sense.
Maybe I don't care about that so much.
Mm-hmm.
But is it the middle of the summer? It's way past the spawn. It's had plenty of opportunities to feed. You know what I mean? I see people holding up a fish 6 weeks after the spawn, talking about it's spawned out. I'm like, it is not that spawned out. It needs some food.
It was spawned out before that.
People don't realize like it's not that hard on bass. Like they spawn and go right back to feeding the next day. They're like 10 seconds after spawning. And female bass don't just spawn one time. They can spawn like 5-6 different nests across a couple week period. They can tuck their eggs back if the cold weather comes in. I don't know. People are real misinformed about how bass spawn. I can tell you that.
Well, see that, I think that's the part is we hear so many of these use this or this happens to bass or this happens with it's hard to know and believe everything, right? And some of it you just kind of have to go out and test and
Yep.
Sycamore asked a question: if bluegill and crappie are outrageously huge, but bass are small, what are your thoughts? Although most of the bass are spotted. And kind of to tag into that, the other question after that was Trevor's of what should the average size of forage for bigger bass be? So I think to kind of tie those together. So if you've got a place with big feeder fish, I think kind of what we've said before is they're probably just eating all the young bass and they're not letting them get big, right? If you've got huge bluegill and crappie.
Actually, yeah, that's basically the same question twice. It's it's not, but it is if you think about it right. Okay, so this question, let's talk about the balance of the fisheries, okay, and the dynamics of it, as opposed to like the species and getting into that. Okay, we have bluegill that are huge and bass that are small. Okay, all right, what does that tell me?
It's a forage heavy lake.
It's a bass heavy lake. It's got too many bass. The bass can't grow. Right?
Because the other stuff's eating them. They're not getting a chance to grow that, right?
Crowded in there. They're all like 10 inches long, 13 inches long, whatever. So what happens is all their mouths are that big. So every bluegill that can fit in that gets wasted. Every bluegill that can't fit in that lives.
It gets big.
And since all the bass' mouth are the same size, the bluegill can grow to trophy sizes. So a stunted bass lake is a trophy bluegill lake. If you said, hey, I'm a fly fisherman and I want you to grow the biggest bluegill, I want to try to grow a 3-pound bluegill in my backyard, I'd stunt your lake intentionally. put feeders on it and feed those bluegill, let them live. They just get behind the bass. So what happens? The bluegill population is low as crap because the bass are eating most of them, but the ones that are there are absolute units.
Monsters.
So that's why that happens. Most of his bass are small, and his bluegill are bigger than those bass can eat. He's got a trophy bluegill pond. Now, back to the other question.
Yep.
What's the average size forage for bass? All right. So what happens is this is the same exact thing. Like as bass numbers drop, forage numbers rise. As forage numbers rise, average size of forage goes down. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's so many of them that it can't grow to large sizes. So you end up with a whole pond full of 3-inch fish and bass down here because there's fewer numbers. Now, if I catch and release my bass and I let them get up on top, let them feed on those numbers, these fish start getting bigger by individual fish. Does that make sense?
Yep. And it's going to get over that number and they just can't keep growing.
So my job as a fisheries manager is, because here's exactly what happens. Like I got this pond down here stocked with bluegill and threadfin shad, and they're awesome small forage, right? I'm gonna let them transition to gizzard shad and rainbow trout in about 24 months, and we're gonna shift that bluegill. We're gonna shift off. We're always gonna have bluegill, but I'm not gonna really encourage threadfin shad at year 3. I'm gonna start encouraging gizzard shad, but I don't want gizzard shad in there for the first 36 months because they're gonna crush me out on my biomass.
Too big, too fast.
I don't have anything that can handle them. I'm not going in with gizzard shad until I got something that can handle them.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Yep.
So
Jesse,
what I got then is I got bass that are going out, and instead of eating a 3-inch bluegill every meal, they're eating a 12-inch, 12-ounce, 13-inch long gizzard shad every meal. Boom, 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 boom.
That's actually another really good point of knowing your fishery, because if you're, I shouldn't say necessarily wasting time, because there's still a chance that a 2-pound bass would eat a 10-inch swim bait, but if you're fishing a place that, I don't know, I feel like that's a double-edged sword, because like you're saying, if they're trained to eat those 3-inch prey, and you go to a place and you're banging your head against the wall throwing a 10-inch swim bait when there's not fish in there even capable of that size of eating it, the chances of them even hitting that, I would assume, would be pretty small, right?
All right, let me give you a scenario what's going to happen to everybody listening on here who has a pond.
Uh-oh.
They're going to go, holy crap, I got too many bass. I'm going to go keep some. And they will. All right, so here's what happens. We got our bluegill. We need our bluegill real high and our bass lower so our bass can grow. But you're like this, right? So what's happening? What we talked about, we had a couple of big bass in the pond that, for whatever reason, got big in a bass-heavy pond. But they're just really, really, right? Just really hard to catch. So you start harvesting those 12 and 13-inch bass from the pond. Guess what happens? Bluegill population rebounds. You're taking pressure off of it. You're shifting the forage base from 1-pound meals to 3-ounce meals. And you're forcing all those bigger fish in that pond to swim around and eat more often.
And they're going to get skinnier, right?
The bass out of the way. You change what they're feeding on. So every single time you get about 20 pounds of bass per acre out of that pond, when it's studded, all of a sudden somebody will come rolling in there with like an 8.5, 9-pounder. Because you've shifted the forage. That fish can't sit back and eat once a month like an alligator, twice a month eating 2-pound bass. Now he's got to go out and make a living, and he's easier to catch.
Now, would he get skinnier too then, because he's having to expend more work to get that?
Yeah, see, so that's, now you're getting into like the real high-tech part of the pond management part of it is you need your bass eating large meals often. Mm-hmm. But if they're eating too large a meal too often, you're never going to catch them. So you've got to scale it back the other way like we're talking about.
And so that's kind of like you were saying, the point of then starting to introduce having those bluegill for the smaller fish to get big, having a few big gizzard shad or trout or something that they can eat to still get those big meals and not have to get, skinny.
I want the availability of all forage sizes.
So Jesse G with the $10 donation. Jesse, thank you very much, man. He said, my local reservoir that was known for double-digit bass was drained to 4% water capacity this summer. How does that affect the bass after they fill it back up?
Let's see. My local reservoir is now drained to 4%.
I would say go fish it while it's drained.
I'd say you lost. Well, here's what happens when you drain ponds down like that. What you're going to get is there's no place for the forage to hide. So the bass crush them out. They just absolutely, like, you know, go get 100 sheet and throw some lines in the same cage match them. You know, what's going to happen? You know, it's just brutal.
Got dark quick.
Yep. It's just brutal. But the problem is then if they're drained out for long enough, they eat all the forage there. So when the lake comes back, it automatically swings to bass heavy because there's not enough forage there. So they're going to really need to come. If they took it to 4%, I'd took it to 0% and just started the whole dang thing over. But they're going to have a real task on their hand if they try to save those fish in 4%, and they're going to try to reintroduce forage. Man, they better go get some tractor trailers loads of fish to put back in that thing.
Well, dude, that completely makes sense because so like I said, a few of the places around here were drained because shad, yellow bass, and stuff. There was a place where they stocked bass from the place that they're in because, like you were saying before, they wanted to save them, right? Mm-hmm. Which I could see with some of the big ones that makes sense, but you know, trying to save everything, I don't, like you said, that doesn't make sense to me. But anyway, they saved some of them, put them in a pond that I used to fish, and that place sucks. And I think it's like you said now. They kept all the bass, put it in a place that was already good before. Now there's however many X number more bass eating all the forage. Now we're bass heavy, and now this all is like making sense in these places that I fish. When before I was like, I either suck or these bass have gotten smarter, but now like it's just a simple. There's way more bass.
I saw that one time. This super rich dude who I can't even name had a 20-acre lake. And he wanted it set up. He wanted it set up instantly for giant bass. So the company that I didn't do the job. I shocked the lake once, but I didn't do the job. The company that did it had a lake that was being drained, a 200-acre lake. So they just went and took all the best fish out of 200 acres and brought them over and put them in that 20 acres. Sounds like a great plan, right? All the 8s and 9s and all the big fish and all the show. And I mean, it was just and it was expensive. Whoo, it was expensive. 10 times as expensive as I could have done the job for if you just did it my way. And I went and shocked it and talked to the guys, and it looked good. It was, I mean, from a fisheries perspective, like from just looking at it, the balance was good. The fish were healthy. You know, everything was great. But there's one thing they didn't think about. That 200-acre lake was fished pretty hard. And all those fish they took out of there had a damn good education. They took all the biggest fish, which are all the smartest fish, put them in a 24-acre lake. The only thing you could catch those fish on was live bait. You could throw the tackle box at them, and I'm talking about world-class bass fishermen, not just joke dudes. You get skunked out there. You better get some shiners.
Yeah, I've noticed that, and now again we've gone full circle back to the bucket and minnows because if you're going to catch them, and that makes sense, dude. That makes a ton of sense. I think we're going to end this on the last question. What is the difference? Is there a technical difference between a pond and a lake? Is it depth?
Size. I think it was like in hectares. I don't even know what a dang hectare is anymore. I want to say it's like, I don't know, they draw the line around 30 acres, 35 acres, something like that. It's like technically it's a pond if it's smaller or bigger than that. Although I would say I would scale that back even more. Probably like, I would group it in like 1 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 40, and 50 up. They're different categories. That's
that makes
how
sense.
I categorize. Like if I was to say, all right, what do you got? 3. All right, you're in a 1 to 5. You know what I mean? You got a 10, you got a 12, you got a 20, you got a 50. Like, I know what to expect just from experience. And they're different from each other, but they're the same 50 to 50 to 50 or 20 to 20. You see what I'm saying?
Yep, that makes sense. And I think that's kind of what we see here too. It's kind of flip of the coin sometimes. Like, I've got ponds that fish like lakes, and I've got some of the lakes that I go to and fish like a little pond, you know?
Yep.
All right. Well, we are Pat, dude. We're almost an hour 45. I'm going to let you go. Everybody, thank you so much for joining. I hope you all enjoyed this as much as I did. Again, Shan, thank you so much. Follow him. Shan, the aquatic biologist. If you look him up on Instagram, said he's going to be doing some more YouTube stuff. I'll definitely be looking out for that, dude. And if you get a spot, if you want to let me know, I can put that down below. If you're selling those, average measures.
Yeah, I will. I don't have it. I don't have many right now.
Okay.
If anybody wants one, just hit me up. I'll get you one.
Super nice of you, dude. Super nice. I appreciate it a ton. We're getting out of here. Thank you all so much for watching tonight. And until next time.